A very warm greetings, everyone. Welcome to the lecture special series of sign language, which is symbolic expression. Under this, we've been talking about Introduction to Environmental Economics, which is the lecture number 9. In this lecture, we will be covering some of our key learning objectives. First, to understand the notion of Rolgian welfare function, to understand various social choice mechanism, to comprehend Arrow's impossibility theorem, to understand the utilitarian perspective and its criticism, finally to discuss selected case studies of environmental protection. Let's first understand the concept of Rolgian social welfare function. In our last lecture series of 8 of Introduction to Environmental Economics, we have been talking about social welfare functions which are derived from utility functions. One of the social welfare function is Rolgian social welfare function. It is a very crucial and significant social welfare function from the society and justice and equity point of view. A social welfare function in welfare economics ranks the alternative states of the economy characterized as less desirable, more desirable, or indifferent. Among all the social welfare function, this particular welfare function, which is Rolgian approach, gave the foundation of veil of ignorance, that with a veil of no clue of their class, privileges, and their disadvantages, even their personality, if you have a veil on that, you do not know about it, then this particular concept was proposed by Rawls. Rawlsian social welfare function measures well-being of the worst of individual, assuming reasonably pluralism and fairness and ideas of cooperation that should be fair to the citizens regarding the freedom of choice and equality. It is this social welfare function that uses its measure of social welfare utility of the worst of member of the society. Imagine a group of individuals who have not entered the economy. They are behind the veil of ignorance. They are unaware of what position they will take or they will be occupying in the society. Under such circumstances, they may become either rich members or class-wise rich members in the economy, or they may be poor members. Allowing inequalities of wealth and income must lead to larger social product. That is, higher wages must cover the cost of training and education, incentives to fill the jobs that are in demand. The statement of Rolgian social welfare function clearly states that the economy is liable to produce more social products in the form of social infrastructure, of health and education. The social product in the form of health and education facilitates to the availability, and it should be available equally to all sections of the society. There has been always an interest, and there has been an inherent trade-off between the growth and distribution, which leads to optimal welfare state. So this is the underlying fact and underlying argument behind the Rolgian social welfare. Ideally, growth must be distributed equitably to achieve welfare or advantage of the least advantaged class or worst of individual. So the question is that has the growth resulted or promoted equity or inequality? So that is the main key concern of defining the social welfare, which is the Rolgian social welfare function. Now let us move on to the concept of environmental decision-making problems. There are certain criteria for social choice mechanism. And under this, we first discuss the first criteria, which is Pareto criterion. It is a non-controversial way of concluding that one society's bundle, societal bundle, is better than the another. If all the individuals prefer one of these alternatives, then one may conclude that the entire society should be preferring that particular alternative. So, the Pareto optimal principle or the Pareto criteria basically is fulfilled when all the individuals preferring one particular bundle over the other becomes the choice of the whole society. Then another criteria is called as the compensation principle, which is called as Kaldor-Hicks compensation principle. If the transfers could be made possible to achieve the unanimity of a particular choice, then the choice is socially desirable. Even if the transfers are not actually made, then also it is considered as socially desirable. This particular principle was attributed by Nicholas Kaldor in 1939 and John Hicks in 1940. Moving on to the third criteria of social choice mechanism, the third one is called as majority rule. The basic problem of Pareto criterion was non-comparability of many bundles, which leads to incompleteness in the ordering of the community bundles. However, the compensation principle solves this particular problem difficulty of comparing various different bundles. However, it solves the difficulty, but at the same time, the bundle which is associated with compensation is really different from the bundle which are rest of the without compensation. Again, there is a problem of demarcation of compensated bundles and non-compensated bundles. Let's move on to the third criteria of social choice mechanism, which is majority rule. A voting rule need not require unanimity. A typical voting mechanism is majority rule. However, voting tends to take the intensity of preferences. If the majority is in favor of one preference relative to the other, it might be the appropriate to the question that the society desirability of choosing that bundle over the others. So, majority rule basically leads to a voting rule. Fourth is the supermajority rule. Voting can be a little more complex than the simple majority rule on all the issues. In many societies, however, we see there are two-tier rules and laws operating. There is a standard set of laws which are enacted by a majority vote of the legislature. The other set of rules which are prevailing, which we find being prevalent in most of the society, are the laws which are embedded in the constitution. That are very difficult to change, and they require more of 50% of majority if you want to change them. The significance of these is the constitutional protection that cannot be easily overridden. These were the basic four principles of criteria for social choice and mechanism. Now we move, having read about them, having understood them, we move on to the next topic, which is Arrow's impossibility theorem, which emerges from all this problem of making a social choice. Arrow states that when voters have three or more distinct alternatives, no ranked voting electoral system can convert ranked preferences of individuals into a community-wide ranking. Basically, he's asserting that it is impossible to come to a conclusion for community-wide ranking or choice. This theorem is named after economist, Nobel laureate Kenneth Arrow. Arrow's impossibility theorem says that given the set of different options, such as different levels of environmental protections, there must be some best way by making a societal choice, some best way of making societal preference or choice. The best social choice mechanism is needed, that is, a way of turning the individual values into the social choice. Individual choices getting converted into a social choice has to be come up to some conclusion. Arrow's impossibility theorem assumes certain things. Assuming we know that individual preferences are ranking over certain social outcomes, Arrow came up with 6 basic requirements or axioms for the social choice mechanism. Based on these 6 fundamental axioms, only then Arrow's impossibility theorem is stated. Under these 6 axioms, first axiom is completeness. Completeness basically means that we should be able to compare all social alternatives. Whatever alternatives created in the society are comparable at any point of time. This is first axiom for Arrow's impossibility theorem. Second axiom is unanimity. If everyone in the society prefers a bundle A or a state A to state B, then the whole society should also be preferring A to B. That is called as unanimity. Third criteria or third axiom is non-dictatorship. No one should always get their way, that is, no one's preference should become the society's preference. That is called as non-dictatorship. Nobody should dictate the choice for the society. Everyone is free to assert and explicitly express their choices. Fourth criteria or the axiom is universality. Any possible individual rankings of alternative is permissible. Universality basically, what is understood from this particular axiom is that any alternative, there shouldn't be any rule or any such rule that avoids or that stops or that bans any kind of alternative to enter the choice. Any alternative is free to enter the set of choices and they are permissible. Fifth criteria is transitivity. If a bundle A is socially preferred to B and B is socially preferred to C, then A should be socially automatically preferred to C. This is called as transitivity criteria or transitivity axiom. So, the last criteria or last axiom is independence of irrelevant alternatives. Society's choice between alternatives A and B should depend only on how individuals rank A and B without regard to their alternatives. So, they should not be affected by any other choice. If the individuals are preferring A on B, A to B, then they should keep on preferring A to B irrelevant of inclusion of more alternatives given to them. So, this gives a consistency in their choices and independence of irrelevant alternatives. Now we go by one to all the 6 criteria or all the 6 axioms of Arrow's impossibility theorem to understand that how each axiom is important and significant to come to the conclusion of Arrow and how they are the building block of the statement of Arrow. Any one of them is violated, the entire statement or the theorem goes invalid. The first axiom is very evident that we should be able to compare the two alternatives and identify which one is best in under any circumstances. The second axiom is probably the simplest and most obvious option. If everyone likes one choice better than the other, then the society should also like that. The third axiom eliminates an obvious but unsatisfactory solution to Arrow's problem, which is to declare somebody as a dictator. This particular possibility of dictatorship has been avoided and it has been definitely discarded out of the system. The fourth axiom is again a very unique axiom consideration. Universality is also very straightforward. It says that individuals are free to have any sort of preferences that they want, and we should still be able to come up with a way of generating a societal preferences. So the options are open for individual freedom of choice has been guaranteed under this particular fourth axiom, that they are free to choose without any pressure and with under no circumstances they are dictated. So they are free to choose and make their own choices. All choices and alternatives are invited and they are welcomed. However, some preferences are easier to aggregate than others. That is also true. Therefore, restricting the possible preferences is one way of solving the problem of making societal choices. The fifth axiom, now we move on to the fifth axiom of transitivity. Let us see how transitivity is important and plays an important role in this particular Arrow's theorem, impossibility theorem. It is intuitive. It is the basic requirement that we assume about individual preferences. When developing a utility theory, we have to understand and incorporate this fundamental of transitivity, principle of transitivity. If I like oranges better than bananas and I prefer bananas better than the apples, then I should like orange better than the apples always, in under any circumstances. This is what is implied by the transitivity. However, this transitivity is violated by many common choices, available choice mechanisms, such as pairwise majority voting. Majority voting principle, they kind of disregard or they violate the rule of transitivity. Now we move on to the next and the last axiom, which is the sixth axiom, which says that if society chooses between A and B and reveals the preference C as an inferior choice. So the point is that if the society has already revealed that the society, individuals are preferring A to B and they have made it very clear, then C has already been discarded or it has been stated as an inferior choice, then it should not affect the choice between A and B ever. They should, under no circumstances, A being preferred to B can be violated in any circumstances. An independence of irrelevant alternative, this is what it means. It is a reasonable characteristic of a social choice mechanism. Suppose there are 10 candidates for the post of mayor in the town. Everyone is in the town needs to reveal their preferences or their choices for the mayor. Out of these 10 candidates, they need to rank each one of them, such as first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. It has to be ranked in this particular manner. A winner will be chosen by the social choice mechanism. Suppose a candidate dies during that elections or after the election, unless that candidate is a winner. The fact that the candidate dies should not change who wins. This is what is the robustness of this particular criteria. Thus, Arrow in 1951 proves the following. There is no rule that is satisfying the axioms 1 to 6, what we have discussed, for converting the individual preferences into the social preference ordering. Basically, Arrow is stating an impossibility theorem that there is no way or no rule that will actually satisfy all the stated axioms which we just now discussed from 1 to 6. By trying to modify these axioms, it becomes plausible to generate a social choice mechanism. So the idea or the notion and the message which has been drawn from the theorem is that it is possible to have a social choice mechanism only by violating any one of them or these axioms. For example, if axiom 4 is weakened, and weakened basically means that it includes only a certain type of well-behaved preferences, then majority voting emerges as a choice mechanism that is satisfying other axioms. So, if you try to weaken one axiom, then the other axioms will be satisfied, and then one can easily come up with a social choice mechanism. We'll continue after a short break. Thank you so much.